Ευχαριστώ πολύ. Θα μιλήσω αγγλικά, διότι έχουμε πολλούς μη ελληνόφωνους παρόντες. The question, whether it is possible to curb global warming while advancing economic growth, opens many issues. I shall make only 7 brief comments. Let me begin with a simple but unpleasant proposition. To advance economic growth is eminently desirable. To curb global warming is, however, a basic existential challenge. If humankind as a whole fails this challenge, the consequence will be nothing less than self-crucifixion in a hell of our own making, and with rapid economic decline inevitable. The existential must always take priority in relation to the desirable. Second, contrary to what promoters of economic growth at any cost often make when they look forward to business as usual into the indefinite future, the more any country delays in facing the challenges, particularly, of course, the major economies, the less likely it is that curbing global warming can be combined with advancing economic growth worldwide. Adopting sustainable policies earlier will permit more economic growth overall than leaving the problem of sustainable policies to later, when the costs for correcting an inevitably more difficult situation than today's will inevitably be much higher. Third, the question posed to us does not make clear whether we are speaking primarily at a planetary or a national level. Since global warming is a planetary phenomenon, it is the larger countries, such as China and the US, which have more weight in determining humankind's ultimate response. This is a crucial point for the world economy and world politics alike. If the larger economies do not perform adequately in curbing global warming, they will certainly pay a substantial price themselves, ultimately, but not necessarily immediately, whereas somewhat smaller economies, yet with very substantial populations, such as Bangladesh and Egypt, may face catastrophes of such a magnitude as to lead to waves of mass emigration. Curbing global warming is increasingly requiring us to think globally, but this is something we are not as yet used to, and we need to accustom ourselves to it very rapidly indeed if we are to have a reasonable chance of meeting the challenge. Fourth, we should not automatically equate economic growth with overall human economic welfare, as Andreas Papandreou has already said. If we can maintain the same living standards with fewer inputs as of costly energy and scarce resources, such as water, in many regions, our overall welfare will have improved even if there is little or no further growth. This is an important point. It remains true, however, that economic growth is certainly required in currently poor countries, as for different reasons in currently indebted countries, such as Greece. There are already some prosperous countries, however, where economic growth may not, in terms of GDP, may not necessarily improve the overall economic welfare of their peoples, and where insistence on continued growth in GDP as a primary aim may not increase the sum of human welfare. I would like to add here that I agree strongly that we need a more varied set of indices to ensure true welfare. And one of these must, as has been said by Mr. Costa and Mrs. Damanaki, be the preservation of natural capital. Fifth, allow me to say that despite this, it is not correct to assume that the only way we can resolve the problem is by regulation. Quite the contrary. One can very easily be a free market ecologist. How? By putting emphasis, first, on personal example, second, on adjusting the market through tax advantages, something which Andrea knows I have been arguing for about 16 years now, with very little success in this country, but a considerable amount of success in Western Europe. And third, of course, through technological innovation. And technological innovation, particularly in the United States and in Germany and the Scandinavian countries, is extremely impressive at the present time. Sixth, it follows from all the above that we cannot easily make predictions. Too many important political and economic decision makers are involved. We can only safely predict ongoing uncertainty for several decades into the future. It is interesting that one of the largest economic powers, the USA, in that country, businesses are currently far ahead of their government in appreciating the nature of the challenge, while the opposite may be true of China. What we do know, however, as a result of ongoing scientific measurement, is that the curbing of global warming and mitigation of climate change are currently proceeding at too slow a pace overall to prevent catastrophe for many countries within the coming 2 generations. The speed of our overall response as countries, as human beings, and as citizens needs to be greatly improved, accelerated. Seventh, and finally, some specific comments about Greece. Greece needs economic growth in order to repay the huge debts which are to a substantial degree the consequence of poor administration and mistaken political priorities, including with regard to the environment and global warming, over a period of at least 30 years. What has been achieved over the last 8 painful years is a downward adjustment to a large segment of economic costs, which in principle allows Greek products and services to be once again competitive. We shall only become competitive in practice, however, if there is also an ongoing improvement in the standard of public administration, something which is unfortunately by no means assured, given the very low standard of public administration in Greece compared with other European countries.
Με τον χρόνο έχουμε ένα μικρό πρόβλημα. Δεν θέλω να σας διακόψω, παρακαλώ.
Another obvious weakness in Greek planning and practice over the generally disastrous 30 years, has been the delay in adjusting to climate change. There has been a failure to make use of cheap and sustainable geothermal energy in the substantial areas of the country where it is available. There has been an overemphasis on the use of cheap and unsustainable lignite. Almost no attention has been given to a reduction in the intensity of energy use. The poor standards of building and town and country planning have led to the creation of heat islands in many towns and cities, which could turn into death traps as average temperatures rise over coming decades. Bioclimatic architecture needs to become a major priority, both in order to curb global warming and in order to adapt to it, but also as a motor for long-term growth in the economy. And let me end with a negative and a positive point. The negative point is that in Greece, adaptation to climate change will inevitably be more important than mitigation because we are such a small part of the world economy. The positive point is that at last in Greece this is becoming well understood, and at the present time the Ministry of the Environment is preparing an adaptation to climate change life integrated program, which, if it goes ahead, will, I think, help a great deal in achieving satisfactory results. Thank you.